Well, welcome everyone. Thanks again for coming. My name is Katie Elder, and I am the Wildlife Conservation Manager for the Catalina Island Conservancy. And I also, she's on Zoom, she's not feeling well, but she helped out a lot with this presentation. I want to acknowledge Destiny Salcido, who is our wildlife biologist. And yeah, I'm going to chat with you guys today about from recovery to resilience, ongoing conservation of our cute little Catalina Island fox. So, the Catalina Island Conservancy is a nonprofit that was founded in 1972 by the Wrigley and Alfield families, and we manage 88% of Catalina Island. Um, and so, there's the majority of the island that is wild spaces is where I get to work most days. But I do want to acknowledge that the Gabrielino Tongva community are the traditional land caretakers of Catalina Island. Um, but Catalina Island is home to over 60 plants and animals that are found nowhere else in the world. And we are fortunate enough to steward that land and try to understand how to best manage it. But it is challenging sometimes because Catalina is the most accessible of the California's Channel Islands, which is wonderful. It means that there's a ton of people that can come out and experience the wonderful natural features that the island has to offer. But it also presents challenges because when people come out, they can sometimes bring things with them that can offset the natural balance of the island. So it's wonderful that it is, it's right next to Los Angeles, a great place for folks to come out and experience wildlands. But that does make it a very fragile and delicate ecosystem, as a lot of the plants and animals on this island didn't evolve with having the complexities that sometimes we can bring over with us from the mainland. Um, but like I said, I'm the wildlife conservation manager, and so there are many species that are only found here on Catalina Island that we have the privilege of studying and managing out here. These are some of them on the slide, but we're going to focus this talk on the Catalina Island fox. Um, and so the Catalina Island fox is one of 6 subspecies of island foxes, and they can be found across 6 of the Channel Islands. So looking at this map of the Channel Islands, all the ones that you can see without squinting really, really hard are the islands that support a fox population. And each of those subpopulations, or each island has its own subspecies of island fox. Um, and 4 of the 6 populations were listed as endangered in um, they were officially listed as endangered by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 2004, but this was caused by insane declines of the populations on these 4 islands. And so on Catalina Island, in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a study done that showed about 1,342 foxes were on the landscape. There was periodic sampling and population monitoring that was happening back then. It wasn't as rigorous as what we do today. But the Institute for Wildlife Studies had been contracted by the Conservancy to every once in a while come out and check on the population. And so the last normal population check that they had was in about 89, 90, and there were 1,342 foxes. However, in the summer of 1990, anecdotal observations of foxes, people were noticing they just hardly weren't seeing any foxes. And there were a lot of reports of dying or dead foxes. And so there was a mystery at hand as to what happened. So this is a graph of the fox populations on the 4 islands that experienced the declines in the fox populations. Catalina is in that pink salmon color. San Miguel is the green. Santa Rosa is purple. And Santa Cruz is blue. And so you can see they all had this incredible crash that happened around 1999, 2000. Um, However, the reasons for these declines were different. On the northern islands, so that was San Miguel, Santa Cruz, and Santa Rosa, these declines were caused by an invasive golden eagle invasion onto the islands. The golden eagles are not usually out on the Channel Islands, but because bald eagles were in decline due to DDT poisoning, the bald eagles were historically keeping the golden eagles out of the northern Channel Islands. But the decline in the bald eagle population allowed the golden eagles to come over and pick off island foxes. They are naive, they don't have any predators out there, so they were very vulnerable to this novel predator. However, that was not the case on Catalina Island, even though it happened at the exact same time. Catalina Island's population crash was caused by a virus, canine distemper, which was introduced. And because the foxes are, their immune systems are very naive, they grew up and evolved on this island where there's not a lot of disease exposure. And when they were exposed to the canine distemper virus, they didn't have any natural immune response to fight it. And it really nearly decimated their population. So once this decline and concern rang all the alarm bells, Catalina Island Conservancy and the Institute for Wildlife Studies went out and set out as many traps as they could across the island. So on this map, all of the green dots represent traps that were set for foxes. And they were setting them out along roads because that way they could put the maximum amount of traps out and get to them as quickly as they can to just understand what was happening to the population. And so before I talk a little more about what they found, I just want to acknowledge the shape of the island, which is very important. So you have this larger portion of the island that we call the east end. And then that is separated by the isthmus, where Two Harbors is, the little pinch point, from the west end of the island, which is the smaller landmass. And the shape of the island in these two sections are very important. And so when they did their trapping efforts, this huge trapping effort, there was only 2% trap success on the east end of the island. So you can see on this map, all those little red dots are locations where they actually caught a fox. So that was only about 2% of the efforts that they put in. Whereas on the west end of the island, that little portion of the island past Two Harbors, they had 45% trap success rate, which was about normal. When you set traps out, you generally don't get a fox in every single trap. So 45 was a more normal number. And when they caught the foxes, they were able to take blood samples that allowed them to do serological testing to kind of understand what kind of infections or diseases their body might have been fighting. And of those foxes, you could see there were a couple of foxes that were caught around Avalon. The two foxes that had the highest titers for canine distemper virus were captured near Avalon. But there's a suspicion that canine distemper virus was the cause. And because Avalon is where the foxes had the biggest immune response, it was likely that Avalon was the introduction point for this disease. And so what this resulted in is a huge island-wide reduction of about 85% loss of the foxes, and specifically on that east end of the island, 95% reduction of the population. And they were able, there was one fox that did pass away that they were able to send in for a necropsy, and that fox died from canine distemper virus. And from the information that they got from that fox, they were able to determine that it was a strain carried by raccoons. And there is a history of raccoons stowing away on people's boats unintentionally. And so this decline was caused by likely a raccoon that had come to the island on somebody's boat that didn't even suspect that it was there. And they brought this virus that just really wiped out the east end of the island. But like I said, thinking of the shape of this island, we had that east end that got really hit by canine distemper. But thankfully, because of the shape of the island, the disease was not able to spread to the west end. And so it was this west end population of foxes that was our hero population and what was really able to save the entire subspecies because we were able to um, work with that population to recover and repopulate the whole island. So we're very thankful for the odd shape of Catalina Island because if it wasn't for that pinch point at Two Harbors, we might not have caught this in time to save the population. So, what that effort looked like was a three-pronged program. First off, there was translocation of foxes from the west end to the east end. About 22 total individuals from the west end were relocated to the east end. There was a captive breeding program. So, this photo that you see below that is where the captive breeding fox pens were. And this resulted in 37 captive bred pups that were able to be released onto the east end. And also, most importantly, was our vaccination program. If you're breeding individuals and relocating individuals and not giving them any kind of defense against the virus, there's no point in doing that release because they're just going to die. So this vaccination program was hugely important. There was an existing vaccine that was developed for ferrets, for the black-footed ferrets, that happened to be highly effective for our foxes. So there was a readily available vaccine that we were able to give the foxes, and they were able to vaccinate about 80% of the population from canine distemper virus. And so this recovery program went from about 2001 until 2004. And it was a huge success. This graph shows the population recovery. The green line is the total island population. The red line with the squares is the east end fox population, and the blue line with the diamonds is the west end fox population. And so you can see that west end population, it did grow, but it remained fairly stable. But the recovery was really driven by the fox population increasing on that east end of the island. So this was this is a graph that shows the population through to our estimates from last year. So this is our most up-to-date graph on fox population health. And as you can see, we have reached what we kind of believe is the carrying capacity for the island right now. We get a few ups and downs. The foxes will trend with different climate regimes, but for the most part, the population is really stable. And so it's really incredible. This is one of conservation's biggest success stories and fastest recovery stories. And it's really, I feel very honored to have been a part of this. And we're very grateful. I get to stand on the shoulders of a lot of incredible biologists who were instrumental in saving our foxes out here on this island, this unique subspecies. So I want to give a thank you to the many people who came before and were able to recover this species. So now I get to step in this wonderful time, which is post-recovery monitoring and management. So one of the things that potentially could have given some earlier signs is if there was just more monitoring, more of a program to keep an eye on these foxes. And so we're hoping that we can learn from everything that everyone that was a part of this recovery program did in the past to help be a little bit proactive and really start to watch the trends in the population and be on top of any novel threats before they become a big enough issue that they've knocked out about 85% of the population. And so what this looks like for us is we do population monitoring. So we have an annual trapping effort. And this gives us, that helps us with that graph, shows us where the population is trending. We also do disease and mortality monitoring. So this involves, taking blood samples, looking at the antibodies that the foxes have to get an idea of what diseases are circulating in the population. We have radio colored individuals so that we can detect if there's a big die-off and retrieve the bodies of any deceased foxes quickly. And this is important so that we can then send them in for a necropsy and understand what it was that caused them to die. And so see if there's anything we can do to mitigate the threats. So coming back to this image, you can see all those many traps. Unfortunately, it's not feasible to every year check all of those traps. So we have, over the years, taken these trap lines and made them into a more manageable set of trap lines that we can measure or we can check every year. So these are the current trap lines. They are just a shrunk down version of the trap lines from when they were doing their massive effort to try and catch all the foxes. And these 6 trap lines are trapped for 4 nights in a row every year. And from this, we are able to get our population estimates. So this is really important for understanding how the population is trending. And so, like I said, this is 6 weeks worth of trapping, 4 nights on each of those grids. We do it in the fall. We try to do it when it's not super hot out, and we also don't want to do it during their breeding season. So that's why we have those dates. And we've reduced the trap lines. It's 216 traps times 4 nights at each of those traps is 872 trap nights. And our trap lines are set up as they are now because we want to get out vaccines and radio collars in areas that is most likely for some sort of new disease or new threat to be introduced. And so these are areas like Avalon, Middle Ranch, the airport, the camps, and 2 harbors, anywhere where people are coming and bringing stuff out to the island. And the hopes are that we can make a vaccinated core of foxes that'll act as a shield and stop any disease spread out of those areas. And also to have radio collared foxes in those areas that are most likely to get any kind of novel disease. And so if they pass away because of any novel threat, we'll be able to detect that quickly and respond. So like I said, the population is trending really well. This graph, it's looking at 2 different metrics. The top one is looking at the adult-only population estimate, and the bottom one is looking at the total population estimate, including pups. And the reason I put this up is you see there's a line and then that goes across horizontally and then a bunch of vertical lines, and those are error bars. And so that is basically we're saying that the population, this is our estimate. So in 2025, we estimated that there was about 2,162 foxes on the island. But we know that that's not exactly true. We did not go out and make sure that there was 2,162 foxes exactly. This is an approximation. And so those error bars are showing kind of the confidence interval that the true number of foxes on the island is somewhere in between the bars on that. And as you can see, for every single year over the last 10 years, those lines are overlapping. So any population trends and zigzagging that you're seeing, it might just be a factor of our estimate, and the population could be exactly the same across there. They're not statistically different. And so this is all to say that basically the population has remained very, very steady over the last 10 years, which is why in 2016 they were downlisted from endangered to threatened. So that was a huge success for us. The foxes on the northern islands were also completely delisted. Our foxes were only downlisted to threatened because the threat of a new disease has not been removed. People are still coming out and have the potential to bring something new. So that is why they're still considered threatened. But yeah, just last year's efforts, we had 374 individual foxes in our hands. We took 147 blood samples. We administered 323 vaccines, and we deployed 21 new VHF tracking collars on the foxes. So it was a very successful year. In this graph, don't worry too much about the minutia of it, but these are the 5 common canine viruses that we test for with our blood samples. So those are canine adenovirus, canine coronavirus, canine distemper virus, canine herpes virus, and canine parvovirus. But as you can see, these viruses are in the population and circulating, particularly canine adenovirus was in about 50% of the foxes that we sampled. They had been exposed to adenovirus. And this is all really important to understand because this means that these current 5 viruses are in the population and circulating, but it's not having an impact on the population. They'll get sick, their body fights it. They have these antibodies proving that they have fought these viruses. But it's not causing any issues to the population right now. So if there was an issue in the future, we could say, okay, we know that they've already been dealing with these viruses, so these are potentially ones that we can rule out. But we monitor or we partner with other institutions that help us even further monitor the viruses that the foxes are getting exposed to. And we are going to get some really important new information on that from some partners with some universities. So very excited on that. And like I said before, we also put out VHF collars. Last year, we put out 21 VHF collars. This fox is sporting a cute little necklace that he's wearing. And these foxes, we put collars on and we leave them unvaccinated, and we use them as our canaries in the coal mine. So these foxes are young. Their immune systems haven't been fighting a lot of viruses or bacteria, so they're pretty naive immune systems. These young ones are also the most likely to disperse. And they're the least likely to die from old age since they're 1 to 3 years old. So that's why we target these foxes to put our VHF collars on. So if they do die, it's likely because they have encountered something that is novel in the environment, and we have their collars. The way that the collars work is if they're left without any motion for 12 hours, they give a different signal off. So if a fox dies or if they drop their collar, we know that that's happened, and we can go find it, send the fox in for a necropsy, and understand why it passed away. And so this is a really important part of us being proactive and trying to look for those next potential threats. So some photos of how we monitor. We have folks that go out on vehicles on the roads and do telemetry from the roads. We're very grateful. We have some awesome volunteers, Julie and Mark, that have been going out every week for us and helping us with that. And also the wildlife team does that monitoring as well. And we also do aerial telemetry about once a month. And this is great because it gives us an opportunity to get to areas that are hard to get to from the roads and really survey the island very thoroughly and quickly. And again, just as a reminder, that's what the antennas are picking up, is that collar that's around the fox's neck. So sorry, sad picture here. But we do have a lot of foxes that die in town because of a variety of methods, including vehicle strike. That's been our main cause of mortality of foxes on Catalina. And as you can see, this poor fox was doing even the best that it could. It was in the crosswalk. But we have a hotline now that allows us to quickly respond to any foxes to get it out of public sight, which don't worry, I'm going to change that so you don't have to keep looking at it. But also to quickly respond to suspicious deaths and understand what caused them to die. So the wildlife team is on call all the time for any injured, sick, or dead foxes. And we also try to help people to mitigate any problems that they might have with foxes in the area. So since I sent you or had you looking at a sad dead fox, here's some cute puppy videos. So these are some pups of this year that are they've been eluding me. I haven't seen one yet this year, but other folks have been out and about and seen some cute fox pups. Um, but we are definitely in a vulnerable time of year for the foxes right now. The pups are born and definitely relying heavily on their parents. So this is a good time for seeing some really cute foxes, but definitely a time when people need to drive slowly and do what they can to keep these guys safe. So we are now in a phase of continued adaptive management. The fox population is stable. Uh, there was a great set of protocols that were set up by the folks who were working on recovering the population in the early 2000s. And so now we can continue to monitor. We can continue to collaborate with other groups. We're very fortunate that there's a lot of partnering researchers. There's a fox working group that we go to every year, and biologists from all six of the islands that have foxes come together, talk about their strategies, talk about their challenges, and work through problems together. Um, and during that, it's also a time for us to work with partnering researchers who can do some really meaningful next level question asking and research into our foxes. So we're doing kind of a long-term management, getting overall trends, but our partnering researchers can really dig deep and ask some of those next level questions about foxes and how to best protect them. And we're also trying to continue outreach and increasing our outreach. There's some photos here. We bring the Avalon fourth graders out to do fox trapping with us. The top photo is a little kid who wanted to make sure that he didn't have a pit tag. We give the foxes a little pit tag just like you give your dog or your cat. And after watching the fox, he needed to make sure he didn't have one either, which he didn't. But it's pretty cute and it's very, very rewarding to have them out. And one of our new outreach stars is Isla the Fox. This is our fire and safety mascot for the island that was just rolled out last year. And one of our local fourth graders picked the name Isla for her. But this is one of our ways that we can bring awareness to the foxes, and also they can be our ambassadors for people being fire safe while they're on the island, and just kind of a nice segue into all the plants and animals that you can find out here on the island. But yeah, our program is really rooted in public outreach. The truth is that in 1999, when the fox population crashed, it was the people that lived out here that noticed, and the people that lived out here that found the uh, recently deceased fox that was able to give everyone the answer that they were looking for, which was that canine distemper was killing the foxes out here. And we continue to really rely on public outreach to help us understand what's happening to the population. For example, this year we had some cases of avian influenza in the foxes, and that was not detected by our monitoring efforts. It was detected by folks letting us know through the Fox hotline that they saw some foxes that were acting irregularly. So we really appreciate all of the support. It takes a village to protect this iconic species, and we feel very fortunate to continue to be able to research and study and maintain their population, and fortunate that we have a community that helps us with those efforts. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to a lot of people. Our Fox program is a huge lift. This was our field crew for the 2025. It included researchers from the Institute for Wildlife Studies, or IWS, and researchers from SWCA. But yeah, the Fox program has been massively collaborative, and there's a lot of people that have helped us across the years and every single year. So thank you to everyone. And that concludes my talk. So I'm going to stop sharing and open it up to questions.
Okay, very interesting. Really neat. And we have a lot of questions. So let me get started on them. So when you were mentioning the populations that were listed as endangered and the ones that weren't, Bella asked, is there a researched explanation for why the other two populations were not listed as endangered?
Yeah, so those two populations did not experience the golden eagles or canine distemper. So the population, it was the populations of foxes on San Nicolas and San Clemente Island that just were not impacted by the threats that hit the other four islands. They have had in the past some declines on those islands as well. And I don't think that they were as well documented necessarily. I think that there was kind of, because it was four islands all at the same time, it was unfortunate, but it allowed for a lot of focus to be put onto understanding and also saving these populations. And what the islands were hit by, the four islands that were hit in 1999, 2000, those were really catastrophic. And the population, like Santa Rosa Island, was down to 15 individuals. It was incredibly close to extinction on that island. So, but yeah, just the golden eagles didn't make it out to those islands, and there wasn't any introduction of the canine distemper either.
Okay, I think what I'll do is I'll skip ahead a little bit because somebody asked about, see if I can find it now in my list of questions, about how the Northern Channel Islands population came back. What accounts for the population rebound on the Northern Islands? Did the bald eagles come back and drive out the golden eagles? How did that happen? It's a big, long story, actually, isn't it?
It is. I did give like just the tip of that iceberg. So, yeah, it was a very complicated story on the Northern Islands. So, there was the bald eagles declining because of the DDT, the golden eagles invading because of the lack of bald eagles. There were also a lot of, at that time, there were pigs and goats on that island, which golden eagles also ate, that was actually supplementing that population. And so the golden eagles were really thriving out there. The foxes just didn't know what to do with predators and were just basically watching themselves, or watching the golden eagles come and take them away. They actually discovered what the cause of the decline was by those VHF collars. They tracked them and they found like 5 carcasses of collared foxes in the golden eagle nests that they were feeding to their chicks. Um, but yeah, the program out there involved relocating the golden eagles, bringing the bald eagles back, cleaning up the the DDT and getting those bald eagle populations reestablished, and then also getting rid of the food that was supplementing the pigs and goats that were supplementing the golden eagle population, and allowing them to have enough food to live out there. So, and then also they did a captive breeding program for the foxes, just like we did on Catalina, where they brought the remaining individuals into captivity, and they had to very carefully do their breeding program, because when you're down to 15 individuals, inbreeding is going to be pretty gnarly. So their breeding was very calculated to try and give the best genetic diversity to the population that arose from that. And they also started vaccinating their foxes for canine distemper and rabies as well. That wasn't what caused their decline, but it did give an opportunity to, because of what we learned on Catalina, to give their foxes a little extra protection.
Great. Okay, back up to the top of the list here. A lot of interest in your talk tonight.
And I'm seeing now
Um,
the comments. Thank you all for the kind remarks. I appreciate that.
yeah. Um, Bella wonders, was there any attempt to capture raccoons on the island? And I think somebody else asked in a related question in here, how about biosecurity measures in general, about keeping off non-native animals from the island. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, so there is a big effort that we will remove raccoons. I think the last raccoon was spotted, I want to say in 2021 on the island, and they were able to send it back to San Pedro where it came from. But there is on the island, people know to look for them. There's also been possums that I've seen in or photos of that hitched a ride to two harbors. So there's a lot of things that are sneaky and they get onto boats. The boaters don't even know that they're there. Um, Knock on wood, I since I've started working, we haven't had any raccoon spottings, but it is something that we're trying to really raise awareness for and figure out. Santa Cruz has a really cool biosecurity program with cameras that will auto detect they're using it specifically for rats. And they'll send out an alert if the camera detects a rat. So we have hopes to bolster our biosecurity program when it comes to raccoons, but we do have signs around the island and at marinas to try and alert boaters to keep an eye out for stowaways. But the truth is that our island is really unique in that it is open. Anybody can come out with their own boat at any time. And there's not, because of that, there's no good way to say, all right, wait, stop. We need to check and make sure that you don't have any raccoons or possums heading or rats in your boat. So biosecurity is a very unique challenge here on Catalina, and it's something that I think we're going to constantly be working on, and we'll never have it 100% figured out because we don't have, because of the restricted access of the northern islands, they can check your stuff. They can make sure that you've, taken all the seeds out of your shoes. But we just don't have that here. And it's a problem with invasive plants, invasive animals. So there is a biosecurity working group. There's a lot of working groups across the Channel Islands because a lot of us have similar challenges. And it's really great. A lot of folks have put a lot of time and effort into thinking about biosecurity measures. And so we talk about those and talk about new outcroppings of plants or Argentine ants or whatever it is that's coming over, and the ways that people have found to treat them or to deal with a problem or detect them. So that's kind of a hand wavy answer, but it's a great question and a very complex problem.
It is, yeah. Sydney wants to know, does the vaccine have an expiration where the canine distemper virus could have a resurgence, or is the threat of it coming back on the island kind of low, hopefully?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our vaccines, they did a study and looked at the serum of foxes. So looked at their blood samples, and they found that the vaccines are only effective for about a year. And so that's why every single year we give out vaccines, and we'll give them to the same fox over and over again, to try and keep that, like I said, just like a shield of protected foxes around areas that canine distemper would likely be introduced again. But there is a strain. So there's many different strains of these viruses, and there is a strain of canine distemper that is on the island, and it was actually on the island even before the raccoon brought that strain over. So it's unique and challenging because viruses mutate really quickly. And so there is a it depends on which strain of the distemper comes in. It's kind of like the flu shots that we get. We can hope that it will provide broad protection against any strain that comes over, but there is a potential that a novel strain comes over that their immune defenses are not capable of handling. So that's why we do try to really rapidly detect and learn as much as we can about what their threats are, because it is possible that a new strain of canine distemper could come to the island and really impact the population again.
Okay. This is an interesting one from Roman. Can drones be used to check the trap lines?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about that. We do need to physically go out there and let the foxes out because we do. It's a trap that physically catches them inside of it. So we would definitely need a drone with opposable thumbs to be able to open the traps. But we do a lot of health checking when we're processing our foxes. They get mites in their ear. The mites were introduced by cats, and the mites actually cause tumors in their ears. So we do a lot of kind of veterinary work when we're capturing the foxes. So we also need to give them their pit tags and their VHF collars. So as far, oh, I guess I see what you're, now that I'm thinking about it, using drones to kind of fly over and not catch a fox and just survey the population in that way. It's a possibility to do that. But trapping is it's nice because you can do spatially explicit um, magical data analysis that'll give us an estimate of the population. Drones are good, but the topography, especially here on Catalina, is pretty rugged, and the resolution and getting down and counting foxes, and also foxes are really good at hiding under things. So I think we actually get a better estimate, or we do get a better estimate from capturing them and surveying their population that way.
Okay, yeah, that trapping brought up a couple other questions. Anonymous asks, how do foxes respond to being handled if trapped? Do they need to be sedated? And Tamara wonders, when you handle foxes, are they generally docile, fussy, annoyed? Is their fur soft? Yes. Of course, it's soft, of course. Great pics of the cuties, she says.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's so funny. And I've now trapped foxes on three different islands. This year I'll add Santa Cruz as my fourth island. And it's funny, every island has like the foxes have a totally different um, temperament. The foxes on Catalina are definitely feisty. But they're incredibly trap happy because the foxes don't have predators or competitors. They don't really know to be afraid of things. And so they are very happy to go into a trap. Sometimes we will catch the same fox all 4 nights in a row because it gets a free meal and a little like protected wire where it can't get in fights with anyone. They're highly territorial and they will fight viciously with each other. So I have a theory that some of them like to just chill out in the trap where nobody can bother them. But yeah, they definitely love going into the traps. Sometimes when we're working with a fox, we'll let it go and it'll run away and just watch you and wait for you to reset it so they can immediately go back in. It's pretty funny. But there are some different personalities. There are some foxes that are trap shy. You'll catch them once and that's it. But for the most part, they're very trap happy. Um, and they are very docile compared to mainland foxes. I helped out with some kit fox trapping up in San Joaquin kit foxes up in San Luis Obispo County. And oh my gosh, those guys want to rip your face off and they're vicious. And getting them out of the trap involves a bag and rolling them up and like making a burrito and trying to get them out while not getting bit or scratched. But the foxes here are comparatively very docile. Like I said, they don't have predators or any competitors, so they think they're really tough, but we're able to just kind of go in and pull them out of the trap and handle them without sedation, which is really they're able to handle even those crazy kit foxes without sedation. Um, but we put a cat muzzle and mask over them so that increases safety for us because it doesn't allow them to bite us, but it also covers their eyes, which really reduces their stress levels. And they actually calm down fairly well. But it's really great to be able to handle a fox without sedating because when you sedate an animal, it has a really big impact on their physiology. And you also have to stay with that animal until they've recovered in order to let them go. So it allows us to trap more foxes and get them back out as easily and seamlessly as possible. But yeah, they're pretty docile. They will still try to scratch and bite, though. All of our handlers are trained and also have rabies vaccinations preventative so that if we do get bit or scratched, that we're protected as well. And all of our work is very permitted. We have permits through California Department of Fish and Wildlife and through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do the work that we do out here. But yeah, it's so funny. The foxes on San Nicolas, they just are so docile. They basically just crawl up in your lap. They don't fight you at all. The foxes here in Catalina are a little feisty. The foxes on Santa Rosa love to scratch and kick. Um, and Santa Cruz, I've heard, are pretty docile and just kind of lie there, don't do much. But yeah, there's some variety, but each island seems to have a different flavor of foxes, and ours are definitely on the more feisty side, but comparatively pretty tame.
Yeah. Roman followed up. The drone can be used to see if a trap is empty or has a captured fox. Save time so you can be more efficient and targeted.
Oh,
That's a comment.
yeah, that is an interesting idea. It's cool. The way that we trap, we have our handlers and then we have someone that we call a runner, which is usually a early career entry into the field position. And they'll go ahead and they'll check the traps and they'll scan the fox. And if it's one that we've already handled that year, they can actually release it for us. Because obviously we don't want to give them like that fox that I was saying that we catch 4 times or 4 nights in a row. We don't want to give it 4 sets of vaccines. So unless the fox had a wound that we were treating or we were giving it antibiotics, they'll run ahead of us and scan the fox, see if it's somebody that we've already said hi to that year. And if it is, we'll let them go. But yeah, I hadn't thought about drones and checking them. That is a really cool idea. And I'm sure there's some applications that we can use for that. That's a cool idea.
Okay. Bella, well, a couple questions about collars. Bella's a little concerned about the size of the collars. She wonders if they can be made less obtrusive, ones that aren't so big. And Elisa wonders how long does a radio collar last on average? And are the batteries changed out?
These are great questions. Yeah, and it's a very good question. It is impactful to put collars on foxes. anything that you do, you want to think about the risks and benefits and make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks. So there is a rule if you're ever putting a collar on an animal that that collar needs to be less than 5% of that animal's body weight. But if you imagine, like I'm imagining my own body weight and carrying 5% of my own body weight around my neck doesn't seem great. So we do err on the lighter side for these foxes. I think it's about 1.6% of their body weight that the collars are. And the part that you're seeing that I was showing in those photos is the battery pack. And so that is the fattest part, but the rest of it around the back is just a strap. So it is not to diminish the size. It is, it is the size that it is, but it is a little, it's just a strap that goes around the backside. Um, and we're very careful when we put them on. We want to make them tight enough that they're not going to get them caught on something like they're running through the brush. We don't want it to be too loose where they can get caught, but we don't want it to be too tight where they are impacted by rubbing or, can't breathe. So putting collars on is one of the things that we require the most training for. You do not get to put a collar on a fox until you have received a lot of training to get that fit and size proper, because it is really important. But the size of the collar is actually dictated by the battery. The batteries are kind of the crux as far as how small we can make it. And the batteries last about 3 years. So we get 3 years worth of data off of each of those collars. And we do remove them once the batteries have um, expired. So there has been thousands of these collars deployed across all of the islands. And there's been very few issues with the collars on the foxes. So while it is an impact on them, it doesn't. My GPS collar foxes on Santa Rosa Island, they actually had a slightly larger collar because the GPS collars need a bigger battery. And one of my boys walked by one of their trail cameras and he had three little pups trailing behind him. So didn't impact him or his reproductive success for that year. So while it is not something to ignore, the collars are it seem to be a manageable size for these foxes.
Okay, we got a few more, and these are all good. Have you been able to learn anything about the fox's habitats / behaviors as individuals from the collars?
Yeah, so our VHF collars,
Rye asked
there's,
that.
sorry, say that again.
Rye asked that, by the way.
Oh, okay. Um, so there's kind of two different types of collars. These VHF collars, which are just collars that put out uh, a beep, basically. You tune to their radio signal and you pick up a beeping sound. And that's the ones that we put out. And our collars are as small as they are because that is the most simple and basic collar that you can get that lasts for a few years. And so those ones, excuse me, they give off a noise. Like I said, a faster beep means that it's died. A slow beep means that it's alive. And you can triangulate and find it, but you have to like physically go out and listen for it and listen for how loud the beeping is and go and walk to it. And then there's GPS collars, which is what I use for my master's project on Santa Rosa Island. And those ones, they actually store data that they collect from satellites, which are giving precise GPS locations of those foxes. And they generally have a VHF component too, so you can go out and listen to the radio sounds as well. Um, but those ones are generally the most informative for getting habitat data because you can get a lot of data points and not put a lot of effort into it. Because if you think about it, I put a GPS collar on a fox that collects a data point every 4 hours. For my project, it was every 7 hours for an entire year. Whereas if you had a VHF collar, you couldn't do that because you'd have to have somebody a human go out and get three different uh, directions and locations every 7 hours for a fox. So the GPS colors are really useful when you're asking those habitat questions. And you can get some really cool information. I'll put a plug in for my master's thesis, but understanding their habitat preferences and also their dispersion techniques. One of my friends who is the fox biologist on Santa Rosa Island is doing some really cool work pairing habitat use with fox diet and age, and she's looking at males and females and how their social dynamics are. And there's some really cool data that you can get from GPS collars, which VHF collars, you could get some of that info, but it would take a lot of manpower and a lot of time.
All right. This is kind of a general question that I'd like to take a crack at it first. Pat asked, what keeps the population? Oh, actually, no, it's the next one that I want to take a crack at. This one I like. It's what keeps the population in check of the foxes? Any natural predators now? They're top dogs, aren't they?
They are, and they are what is keeping each other in check. Yeah, they are literally the top dogs out here. Um, and it's just resource availability, really. That's one of the unique things about these foxes is mainland foxes is if the, neighborhood gets too full, you could potentially move out and go find your own place somewhere. But this island is a very finite size. And given the resources that are on the island, that's basically what's limiting the fox population at this time. Um, they don't have any natural predators out here. I've seen um, like uh, we have red-tailed hawks, and I've seen them go after pups before. Um, but for the most part, they don't have any natural predators out here. So they are the things keeping them their own population in check. Like I said, they fight pretty viciously. They're very territorial, and so they they will not tolerate another fox in their area, and so that's probably the biggest check to their population is just themselves.
Okay. Tamara asks, what is the best way to help you with keeping the foxes safe and healthy? And I wanted to say that you can certainly support the Catalina Island Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy or Friends of the Island Fox, right? But what other ideas do you have?
Yes, those are all excellent suggestions. But yeah, I meant to give a shout out. Friends of the Island Fox is who provides our vaccinations every year, so we're very grateful. And they've also put on the Island Fox Working Group. But yeah, we really appreciate folks on the island that help us with the hotline. And actually, our hotline is how we met our volunteer pilot. We have a wonderful volunteer pilot who volunteers his time, plane, and gas to come out and help us with the aerial telemetry that we do. And so, we actually met him because he was reporting a sick and injured fox on the island. But I think absolutely just coming out and seeing them and raising awareness and telling people how special they are. Because one of the things that the foxes are so cute. They're a great animal that people can fall in love with, but protecting them also protects all the other animals and plants that are out here that maybe aren't as charismatic. And so just raising awareness about the native plants and animals out here can really help to get more people excited and involved. Um, and also, just if you are going out to the Channel Islands, Catalina is especially, but I mean, all of them, is just thinking about how you could be biosecure yourself. Like if you are bringing your hiking boots out, make sure you've picked out all of the little grass seeds, wash them off if you've been in some waterways. There's a fungal infection that kills amphibians, chytrid. So just making sure what you're bringing out to the island is as clean as possible, and making sure that if you come out with a dog or a cat, that you have them up to date on all their vaccines, that you have them up to date on flea and tick medications, just reducing the risk of what you are bringing out to the island is really the biggest thing that you can do if you're coming out.
Okay. Tamara again. She asked several questions. Thank you, Tamara. Congratulations, she says. How large is the territory of the fox? Do they overlap? How tolerant are they of each other? I think you sort of answered some of that already, but go ahead.
Yeah, I answered the last part. They're not tolerant at all of each other, except for with their mates. The males and the females will overlap almost exactly for a mated pair. But yeah, my master's work, I was looking at how their home range size and overlap changed as their population recovered. I was looking at data that was collected on Santa Rosa when there were only about 400 individuals on the island, and then comparing that to modern day where there's over 2,000 individuals on the island, and looking at um, the home range characteristic and sizes. And what I found was that the home ranges were an order of magnitude larger when there were only 400 foxes on the island. So the size of the home range is like about a kilometer squared, very small, and overlap is basically none. I was only looking at males, so I wanted for my project to just compare um, individuals of the same sex. But like I said, the females will overlap heavily with males. But yeah, they have very small home ranges. At least my foxes on Rosa did, and very little overlap because they do fight very viciously. You can hear them fighting sometimes in the hills, and they will, like one of my foxes. I called him Ping Pong because he was bouncing all around. Those young foxes that are 1 years old, 2 years old, that are going out and they're trying to find new habitats. They will definitely overlap and bounce around. I also found that there is some tolerance of overlap when there is a good resource like the ocean. They would kind of funnel in to eat some ocean resources. And around camps, unfortunately, that's another thing people can do is not feed the foxes. That's a really bad way for foxes to meet a bad end is when people feed foxes. But there's a lot of sad foxes that live around the campgrounds that are just constantly fighting with each other, but trying to share that space. But yeah, they live on really tiny little postage stamps unless their density, unless like we don't want this to happen again, a population decline happens and they have more space, then they will spread out. But still don't overlap even when they have all that space.
Tamara asked again, or follow up, are they monogamous?
For the most part, yes, but sometimes, the neighbor is tempting. But yeah, they are.
Okay. Um, she also asked if the outreach fox name is spelled ESLA or ISLA. Probably ISLA, right?
Yeah, great question. Because IWS, they named one of their eaglets Isla, but they spelled it differently. But yeah, it's ISLA, like the Spanish word for island.
Right. She says, great illustrations in your slides. And then a real general question: how did Alina asked, how did the foxes come to the islands? That's a good one.
That is a great question. And it's one that we're still learning about. And actually, I'm very excited. This last year, we had a researcher come out and get a genetic sample that's going to give us the entire genome for our foxes out here. She's done it on all of the islands. And this is really going to help us to untangle the timeline of fox um, arrival at all of the islands. But one of the leading theories right now is that the northern four islands were at a long time, like thousands of years ago, they were all one island called Santa Rosa. And at that time, the sea levels were much lower, and the distance between the islands and the mainland was much smaller. So the thoughts are that the foxes rafted out onto Santa Rosa at that time. And then the sea levels rose and the foxes were separated out onto the individual islands. And then potentially early peoples brought them to the southern islands. But yeah, that's still kind of a mystery and something that there's some work going on right now to kind of answer that. But it was likely about 6,000 ish years ago that happened, coming to Catalina, that is.
I think the oldest ones, if I recall, are in sites from San Miguel that are about 8,000 years old, if I remember right.
Yeah, like
And
8 to 12,000, somewhere around. There's a range.
okay. And so there is a school of thought also that they were introduced in the first place to the islands by native people, but nobody really knows yet, huh?
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely something that we're still learning a lot about and nobody fully knows yet. Yeah.
Okay. Melanie says, thank you for sharing with us, Katie. If you have time to share, I was wondering if you have any insights on the impacts of the foxes on Santa Rosa Island given the fire.
Yeah, yeah. My heart has been kind of breaking for those foxes, especially 10 of the 15 foxes that I had used or that had collars on for my master's project. They were all in the areas that were burned. So I'm very interested to see what they find. Their trapping season starts next month, so they'll be going out and assessing the population at that time. I'm hoping that, um, I mean, luckily foxes are mobile, so I'm hoping that most of them were able to get out of the way of the fire. I do know that we have had, we had the large 2007 fire here on Catalina, and the foxes, that was still during a time when our fox population was recovering. So it was a very sensitive time, and the folks that were working and IWS went out and immediately assessed the foxes. And there were some that had some burned paws and some that required a little medical attention. But it was interesting that they actually found that the foxes after the fire flooded the burned area because things like lizards and mice that are their prey didn't have their normal hidey bushes to hide in. And so it was kind of a smorgasbord for the foxes. So I I'm hoping that there are some foxes making lemons out of lemonade out there with their food choices in the burned area. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit before we fully understand the impact that the fire had on the foxes.
All right, let's see. Down to the last few here. The couple of comments keep coming in. I'll be glad to read them. But both of these are not related to foxes. Um, Kira says, not related to foxes, but why have the shrew populations been struggling?
That is a great question, and that is a big mystery. Yeah, so our Fox program is definitely our most robust program and our most well talked about program. But we also are studying the Catalina Island ornate shrew, which is another one of our endemics, and they were actually considered extinct for about 50 years, and then their population was rediscovered. They are a particularly challenging species to study. Shrews, even though they look like mice, they're actually not rodents. They're insectivores. And so they have a bunch of little tiny sharp teeth. But they require food basically every hour. I sometimes feel like I might be a shrew, but they will literally die if they don't get enough food. And so we can't trap them very easily because they are very delicate. It requires a lot of checking because we can't leave them in a trap for too long. And also, they're very elusive. Our foxes have no predators, so they're walking around. They're cathemeral, meaning they kind of are active when they want to be. But shrews are nocturnal. They're very much, they seem to be mostly in riparian areas. And and they're very fragile. So we want to be sure that if we're ever capturing, like physically capturing a shrew, that we're being careful, especially because we thought their population was extinct and every individual could potentially, that any individual that would be lost could potentially have a catastrophic big impact on their population. They only live about 12 to 16 months. So they're very short lived animals. And so they've been elusive. We're trying our hardest. We use downward facing camera traps. So what we do is we have a tea strainer that we fill with mealworms, and the sound of the mealworms crawling attracts the shrews and inside of a bucket basically. And in that bucket is a camera that is triggered by motion. And so that's the way that we've been monitoring shrews for the last few years. And we did see one this year. There's still at least one shrew on the island, but it's pretty intensive. You got to go through a lot of cameras and a lot of photos to get one shrew photo. Emily, our assistant biologist, spends hours and hours, even using this software that Santa Cruz developed to look at images and categorize them for you. It's been a lot of effort for one shrew this year. So we're definitely working on trying to understand that population better, but they're much harder to study than the foxes are.
Interesting. Couple other questions that come in that are fox related. How much interaction is there between the foxes and the bison and the mule deer?
That's an interesting question. I have never seen a fox interact with a bison personally, um, but I'm sure that they've had to run. I was doing some small mammal trapping out here for mice, our endemic mice, and a bison stepped on one of the traps. So we try very hard to. Luckily, there was no mouse in the trap, but we try hard to put our fox traps in areas where a bison wouldn't step on it or mess with it in any way. Uh, I do think that the deer are definitely bolstering the tick population that we have here on the island. I think both the deer and the foxes get the same ticks. So there is a disease transfer there. And the foxes will scavenge dead deer for sure. Um, but yeah, the deer are definitely munching on some of the things that foxes like and use for habitat. But I know there's some funny pictures out there of a fox and a deer giving each other what looks like a kiss. So, so there's some interesting interactions out there for sure.
I forgot to mention that Robert asked that question. Um, let's see here. Bella asked, are there any environmental or conservation policies that your organization is currently advocating for to benefit the foxes?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as policies, anything that we can do. So, as you saw with that graph, their population is really kind of at a point where it's just what the island is supporting. And so, anything that we can do to bolster the habitat and bolster the resiliency of the habitat on the island is going to really help the foxes out. Because the only way that we can support more foxes is by providing better habitat for them, really. So that is really the biggest way that we're trying to advocate with what we're doing. But as far as like the biosecurity issues go, we work with the city of Avalon, and we have a wildlife task force where we're trying to collaborate and put some new um, rules in place to kind of help make sure that people are vaccinating their pets, make sure that people are checking their vessels before they bring them over. So those are kind of and working with marinas to try to put up signs and putting up information at the Catalina Express, where the majority of the visitors come out to the island, about checking their gear, making sure that pets are vaccinated, checking their boats. So we have some partnerships, and we're trying to work on that. But it's definitely a slow process when it comes to um, helping people make good decisions as they're coming over, when not everybody's coming through the exact same port of entry to get out here. But yeah, that, those are kind of the biggest things that we've been working on right now.
Okay. All right. Another one just came in. Charles asked, you mentioned some of it, but what is the typical diet of the fox?
Yeah, great question. They are opportunistic omnivores, so pretty much anything that they can get their mouth over. They will, during the dry months, they'll eat a lot of prickly pears. It's funny because they will sometimes we'll catch them and they'll be completely purple because they've eaten prickly pears. They eat toyons and red berries. The red berries is funny again. You catch a fox and they're just light. Highlighter yellow because the berries turn them yellow. During the pupping season, it's really important that they have access to lizards and mice that they feed their pups. During the early years of the project, when they were trapping earlier in the year, when there were still puppies around, um, I've heard that you could tell if you had caught a pup before you got to the trap because the parents would actually make a pile of um, mice outside of the trap for the puppies, trying to give them food. So they definitely eat a lot of mice. And yeah, they're actually really important for helping to distribute seeds for some of our native plants, like our Catalina Island manzanita. This plant actually, the seeds are really, really hard, and they require an animal to eat them and have their stomach acid rip apart the seed coat and poop them out for those seeds to germinate. So foxes are actually pretty important for spreading seeds and also allowing those seeds to germinate. Um, but yeah, they're very opportunistic. Like I said, we had some foxes that tested positive for avian influenza, and we believe that's because they were eating dead seabirds that had washed up. Destiny, our biologist, actually watched a fox doing that. So, and we've seen them scavenging deer carcasses. They really will eat whatever they can find. Oh, and insects too. I
Okay.
forgot about that.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you'll see little paw prints on the beach. They'll get into the tide pools too sometimes.
Amazing. Bella was wondering why people are allowed to bring pets to the island. It seems like a potential trouble, but a lot of it's private property out on Catalina. So,
Yeah, Catalina, it's one of the unique things about the island is there's a resident population of about 4,000 people that live out here full time. And yeah, people like to have pets. And there is not actually any good way to keep people from bringing pets out here. Because people don't have to, like the northern islands or the naval islands, you have to come on a naval vessel or on the for the most part on island packers boats, and you're only staying out there for camping. But out here people can come out with their own private boats, and they live out here, and it's just it's on conservancy land we can impose rules, but when it comes to the towns, it's city regulations, and so yeah, in an ideal world, probably there wouldn't be pets allowed out here, um, but that just hasn't been a reality. So I think the way that we've kind of been looking at it is just trying to help people be as careful with their pets, and encouraging them to make good decisions with vaccinations, and taking care of their pets while they're out here and keeping them on leashes. We've had lots of foxes killed by dogs off leash. So yeah, it's not ideal, but it's the reality with the land ownership and land use out here.
yeah, they're not allowed on the park islands, but I've watched boaters bring pets in. And I remember nicely confronting one person. but it happens all the time unless there's a ranger around to watch for that kind of thing. There
Yeah,
isn't a lot to do about it. But
yeah.
yeah. Uh, Elena asks, how long do pups stay with mom?
That's a good question. So it depends. Just like us, there's some that have a little failure to launch. Um, there's some that will stay around for 1 to 2 years, sometimes three, and they'll kind of help out. But for the most part, they'll start dispersing in the winter, like late fall, early winter is when some of them will start dispersing. So that's, let's see, they pup around April. That's April, May, June, July, August. So like 5 months ish.
Okay. All right. One last question. It's totally off topic, but I saved it for the end just to get all the fox and other biology questions out of their way. Roman
Oh,
asks, are the carts in Avalon finally required to be battery powered? I don't know whether he asked it that way, but
no, I want to. I hope it was that way because I feel the same way. It drives me crazy. You're going in and it's like you're dying of smog, but unfortunately not. I think it has to do with the fact that the infrastructure isn't set up for powering that many. But oh my gosh, I would love for electric carts in Avalon, and I cannot stand the sound and smell of the gas powered um, golf carts. But sadly, they are still there. So I wish I had a different answer for that one, but no.
all right. Well, I think we'll bring it to a close, but I'm going to read some comments. These are all comments. David says, I just wanted to say what a wonderful, vibrant slide presentation that was. The images and statistics were illuminating. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Ingo says, thank you for your info. Krista says, thank you so much for your knowledge and experience with us. Elena says, interesting. Thank you. Elena said several things tonight. Thank you very much, Elena. Susan says, thanks. That was so interesting. I learned some new things. Love those foxes. Julie says, thank you for your presentation, for all your hard work with the foxes. Doreen says, thank you for hosting CIR, and thank you, Katie, for the presentation. And Charles says, this was right after you answered one of his questions. Oh, cool. This was about the fox diet. He says, I love prickly pears, tasty.
Yes.
Thanks, thanks, Katie, for all your work and that you and your team is doing. And Lisa says, super interesting, fabulous presentation. And with that, I think I'll bring us to a close. I want to thank you too, Katie. That was fun. That was a lot of really great interactions from a lot of people. I don't think I've read so many questions before. So that's pretty neat.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate these are all such great questions, and I really appreciate you all spending your time with me this evening. And thank you so much for the kind words. I really enjoyed virtually being here with you all.
And remember, you can see this presentation again if you missed any of it or any of the other presentations we've done over the years at CIRTV, CIRTV, CIR.TV. Sorry, I got to do that right. The domain is CIR.TV. Thank you again, Katie. Have a good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.